Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are. Thank you for joining the ARPA Institute panel discussion series. As you know, the ARPA Institute organizes panel discussions at least once a month, the whole year. And in addition to that, of course, we have our activities in Armenia. The ARPA Institute is composed of experts in various fields. We have 21 board members, and we try to provide assistance in many different areas, including science, technology, healthcare, and many other areas. And we have a few ongoing projects already in Armenia. Our latest project is a course on advanced circuit design in the National Polytechnic University of Armenia. It is already in progress. We had this last year, 120 students following the course, and it's being taught by experts from Cisco and from Synopsys. The main idea is to have them learn the general language or the general program that is being used by all circuit designers. It's called Cadence, and Cadence is well known worldwide. And Cadence has actually provided the software for free to the university. And now we are trying to provide enough experts so that, as you know, there's a big data center being built already in Armenia by NVIDIA, and there will be quite a few experts and engineers needed. So we're trying to provide that workforce. And the second project is, of course, our clean room in the Alekhanian National Lab, which is now active and it's being used. We also have a couple of projects with the Alekhanian National Lab. One of them is called radio frequency photomultiplier tube, which is essentially a photon counting device. In other words, it essentially can detect laser pulses down to a picosecond accuracy, which is much better than what exists in the world. And this can be used in advanced microscopes, in diagnostic instrumentation, and many other areas. And now we have an expert in commercialization. We're trying to help that project become a commercial project as well. And also we work with solar cells. We have a new advanced method of increasing the efficiency of solar cells from the normal available efficiency, which is 22 to 25% efficiency, up to 50 to 60% efficiency. And this new approach is being tested right now, and we already have very good results. And we are trying to also develop prototypes so it can be commercialized. We also work with, of course, other universities, the Bedagan Hamalsaran, the Yerevan State University, as well as many other institutes in the Academy of Sciences, like the Chemical Physics Institute, Physical Research Institute, the Molecular Biology Institute, and many others. So our main goal is to provide assistance to the public institutions in Armenia. And of course, we have to work with the government in order for everything to be moving smoothly. And we especially work with the Ministry of Education, Science, Culture, and Sports, as well as the High-Tech Ministry and the Ministry of Economy. And we have quite a few projects that we have achieved through their help as well, of course. But also a very important project is our invention competition for young scientists, where we try to promote inventions that can become, again, eventually projects and commercialized so we can create new jobs. This year, we have received 12 very interesting and very advanced projects, inventions, and they have already been sent to quite a few experts. They are now being evaluated. And once we evaluate all the projects, we then decide a winner, and the main winner receives $10,000 so they can advance their project further. And of course, we try to monitor it and uh, and help them as much as we can. And the main goal again is to commercialize it. So that's about ARPA Institute, and of course, we work based on donations. So if you like what we are doing, please donate so we can do more in Armenia. And if you have any questions or any suggestions, or if you know any experts who can provide any assistance, please let us know and we'll get them involved. And today, as you have read, we are very pleased to have experts that are panelists on panel discussion. The title is A Psychosocial Assessment of the Leadership of Armenia During the Karabakh Negotiations between Armenia and Azerbaijan. And the experts that will be discussing these items are Dr. Armen Goenjian, Dr. Jirair Libaridian, Dr. Pamela Steiner, Dr. Mikayel Zolyan, and the moderator is Dr. Hriar Cabayan. Hriar, of course, is a board member, and he's the main organizer of many of these interesting panel discussions on various topics. He has had about 20 or over 20 years of expertise working in the Pentagon, as well as in the Lawrence Livermore lab. So he has quite a very extensive background in various areas, and he'll be moderating the panel discussion today. So if you have any questions, please post it on the chat room, and Hriar will be reading it later on. Thank you for joining us, and Hriar, please take it over.
Well, thank you, Agop, for the introduction. I want to welcome everybody, the audience. I'm happy you're here, and I want to let you know that this will be recorded and the recording will be made available. So if you have other friends who couldn't dial in or such, you could forward it to them. So Agop already went through the great list of panelists we have. Uh, and you have their bios in the announcements. I'm not going to take time, otherwise I'll spend 10, 15 minutes reading the bios. So you have him in the announcement. So let me, why is this type of analysis is important? I'll take a few minutes to tell you that, so you see why this is very pertinent. You look at the leadership styles, and most importantly, on the decision-making tendencies of the leadership of people you're dealing with, and the psychological underpinning. By way of background, back in October 25 of last year, University of British Columbia team presented their assessment of Aliyev. I asked them to do that assessment of Aliyev's psychological thinking processes, and nurses at the time gave him pertinent speeches that we were very much interested in over the years. So they had all of that, and they did several of them on their own on their own funding. By the way, they did a very deep dive into Aliyev's thinking processes. So that's available on the ARPA platform. So if you're interested, please dial into ARPA, go to the website, and you will. Now, also back in 2022, I collaborated with the same UBC team to assess changes in Putin's thinking processes. That report is available. If you can interested, I can forward it to you. Just send me an email, and I will do that. So why is this important? Again, I'm going to be brief, as Hagop mentioned. As a science advisor in the Joint Staff, it wasn't enough to know what the other person was saying. Of course, it's very important to listen to what the other guy is saying. I mean, if you don't listen, you fail every time, right? You got to listen. But what the planners wanted is to anticipate what they may do in the future. To do that, you got to look into their speeches and try to read between the lines. And that's what social psychologists do. I am not, right? But I relied on them. So this panel today was going to examine the psychological factors that shape decision-making of Armenian leadership after independence. Now, session one, I'm looking forward to it. We have a conversation on this topic between Doctors Pamela Steiner and Dr. Jirair Libaridian. They're going to take over here in a couple of minutes. Then in panel two, we're going to go have a panel discussion with Doctors Armen Goenjian, Dr. Mikayel Zolyan, and Dr. Jirair Libaridian. I will introduce that and I'll say a few comments how we plan to do panel two. But right now, I'm gonna yield the floor to Jirair to start with the topic one, and that the discussion with Dr. Pamela Steiner. Jirair, over to you.
Thank you very much, Hriar Hagop, for this opportunity. In the next 30 minutes, Pamela Steiner and I will explore the basic questions of collective trauma. And that is a major factor in the way negotiators, decision makers function. Let me say two things. Pamela and I have been friends for decades, and we are practically neighbors in terms of US distances. Our houses are less than a kilometer away. So we have met often and we have worked together. And I should add that Pam did a profile of Aliyev some years ago, which was very useful. Now, Pam will have a chance to explain her motivation and background, but I have about 7 questions to ask, and the first one is the fundamental one. Pam, what is collective trauma?
Right. Well, thank you, everybody, and Jirair and Hriar. I'm really honored to be invited to present my perspective on the role I ascribe to collective trauma in situations leading to conflict and to situations of conflict and in situations post-conflict of conflict management, peace building, and maintenance. So I'm going to introduce myself a little first with a frame because I'm not going to talk much about your specific topic today. I'm not fit to do that. And but I think that what I have to offer provides what has already been called background. But I want to say how I feel so honored to present and engage with you, and at the same time deeply challenged to present in such a way that you might consider seriously engaging with what I put forward, because it's out of the usual zone of comfort and so on of most of your work, not all from what I've picked up. Now, it's far too late for me in my life to be persuaded that working for change or the process of changing itself is comfortable. Tolerance for discomfort is necessary and can be built. And so I ask you to bear that in mind as you listen to me, because maybe what I'll say is uncomfortable. And certainly what I advocate is not comfortable. Now, I believe that your focus as a group in this psychosocial realm is usually on leadership or leaders. And my book does focus on quite a few individual leaders in official and non-official roles, including the three heads of the CUP, Talat, Jamal, and Enver, and the two heads of the special organization, Nazim and Shakir. And I found that each of them had personally experienced traumas when young. Each of those traumas was connected to what was going on in the Ottoman Empire then, and the trauma that you could say that the empire was going through as it was slowly sinking. And then these five men behaved in office, directly reflecting those traumas. So, nonetheless, my book's main focus is on the effect of collective trauma on peoples more than on individuals with positions. I think that for conflict resolution, which has always been my goal and purpose, that focus on both leadership and people are necessary. And I see collective trauma post-conflict as contributing to keeping people stuck in destructive and unproductive attitudes manifested in relationships with the other, and also sometimes among themselves. Thus, collective trauma can interrupt or derail hard-won progressive change, such as what is currently possible for Armenia going forward. Therefore, I argue that taking account of collective trauma should improve conflict resolution efforts. I've acquired my views over quite a period of time when I was simultaneously studying trauma and training in working with it, when I was in therapy to heal my own personal trauma, and when I was part of facilitating conflict resolution processes, primarily between Armenians and Turks and between Israeli Jews and Palestinians, the latter being both Arab citizens of Israel and of the territories. Before these workshops, we always began with working with each identity group on its own, and we always worked in teams. Over time, colleagues and I have come to view that one-party work as needing far more time than it's received. The aim isn't to get the parties together too soon. It's to get real work done among each party separately. Concerns in one party to the conflict and how they will come across to the other members in their own party are as great as concerns about how one will come across to the other party. And so now I can get to the question, what is collective trauma? Collective trauma refers to the material and psychological impact on large numbers of people of extremely stressful societal level events on the fabric of a place and on that place's social space. It's common understanding that there are two basic kinds of trauma: shock trauma and situational trauma, whether or individual, kills people. A frog dropped into a pot of boiling water experiences shock trauma. Can you hear me okay? Yes? I can't
Yes,
hear you.
now,
Okay.
yes.
Okay. The other kind is situational trauma, in which your environment is traumatizing, but unobviously. A frog dropped into a pot of very slowly boiling water experiences situational trauma. An illustration from your history. Krikor Zohrab was the brilliant, sophisticated, humane Armenian lawyer and law teacher of Turks and Armenians alike. In the period just before the genocide, he also attempted to stave off armed confrontations and advocated for the 1876 Ottoman Constitution. He was still a member of the Ottoman Chamber of Deputies and a distinguished, well-known one. when he was tortured and murdered at the start of the genocide. He had remained in slowly boiling water. Another commonly made distinction between kinds of collective traumas is traumas caused by people and those caused by nature. Some humanly caused collective traumas are wars, discrimination, genocide, loss of class status. Others are natural, like earthquakes or tidal waves. That is, if climate change is not the cause. Forest fires and starvation can be caused by humans and or natural causes. Another concept essential in understanding and working with collective trauma is transmitted trauma, of which intergenerational trauma is a type. Collective and individual trauma may be transmitted over space and time. Another basic distinction is the use of the concept of trauma to refer to both to observable events, measurable often, in the outside world, including threats or traumas, and to refer to subjective traumatic reactions to the traumatic event in the outside world. Finally, individuals and collective subgroups will react to the same event, to the same traumatic event differently, depending, in individual cases, on age. The younger you are, the worse, prior experiences, and mental status. It's somewhat similar for societies. If past experience has been traumatic, they tend to be triggerable and react strongly emotionally, and not maybe what many would call rationally. That must be worked with as long as it's been set up to be worked with. That is, in processes for working with collective trauma. A large number of Israeli Jews and American Jews and Armenians in Armenia and the diaspora, not to mention Greeks, carry a lot of unprocessed, highly triggerable trauma. So that's my answer to question 1, Jirair.
Yeah, thank you, Pam. It's very enlightening. Let me ask you about the motivation. Why did you study this very complex and difficult issue?
Well, okay, you're skipping a question.
Well, you partially answered. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Let's see. Well, what motivated me was at different levels. I was very frustrated with doing this work for so long and seeing very little progress. And even though there were well-meaning people who learned a lot in the workshops that colleagues and I facilitated, there was no change really in the Israeli-Palestinian relationship, and it's only gotten infinitely worse, of course. And there was no real change. There was a huge change in the Armenian-Turkish one, insofar as there was recognition by this country of there being a genocide, official recognition. But it has not really brought the Turks any closer to admission or taking steps to change the relationship and change their own understanding. So I thought that, and I've seen trauma disrupt the work in workshops, the undealt with trauma. So I thought I could, as a clinician working with trauma, help formulate some ways of dealing with it in workshops and outside of workshops in big public meetings that could make a difference.
Okay. Could you, Pam, apply your argument regarding the significance of collective trauma to the 1990s? Armenia-Azerbaijan, Armenia-Turkey. That is, how does collective trauma translate itself into the behavior of negotiators, leaders, and decision makers?
Well, I don't feel I'm the best person to answer that, but I would like to offer what I understand to be widespread tendencies in among many Armenians as a mindset which hampers them as a people. And it was one of them was pointed out also profoundly by the Armenian philosopher whose name is not in my head right now. But it was really that Armenians depended on others to save them and rescue them. And that is applied both to the Turks, as if this man said they couldn't heal. They felt they couldn't heal without Turkish recognition, apology, and giving something back and promising not to repeat what they had done to the remaining Armenians. And this puts the Armenians, it's totally understandable that Armenians desperately want something from Turks, desperately have wanted it, and will always feel that way. That is a given. And it's terribly hard to imagine that a people should have to get over that without some acknowledgement and work on the part of the perpetrator, the way Germany has done a great deal after being forced into the position of admitting its wrongs some years after the end of the Second World War toward Jews. So it's totally understandable. But on the other hand, I'm sure we all know people who have been victims at the personal level of all kinds of wrongs and who can never get anything given back to them or the perpetrator acknowledge what was done. All too many. The world's full of them. So there must be some other way to heal in a good enough way. And so that's something that, and I do think it has to be done by bringing along the past. You can't just bury the past. But I don't know if that has to get into negotiations themselves. I can't answer that. It'd be nice if I could, but it depends on the level of negotiations. There are all kinds of meetings that occur. The work that I did was through Herbert Kellman, who had worked at Harvard with Jews and Palestinians for many, many years, decades even, and they were all unofficial, non-official, so-called track two workshops. They were with influentials, and it went well as far as it went, but the problems have not been resolved at all. So that was one tendency. I think that the humanizing of the other has to occur. I know that one of the recommendations of the document that Hriar sent me about Aliyev advocates at the end for building trust. And that was something that Herb Kellman hugely stressed. And any negotiator has to try to build trust. But if they are backed by populations that only hate and resent the other that the negotiator is dealing with, at some point or other, that's going to derail things. Maybe not immediately, but I do think it has to be worked with. It has to be taken on as part of the work within a population. And I did facilitate and initiate a meeting, which I thought provided a model for that. And I could talk about that now if you would like.
Well, let me go back for a second, Pam.
Sure.
And how did you get involved in the Armenian issue anyway? Do you have a personal?
Well, are you? Yes, I do.
I think
I was always interested in it because, yeah. What?
Go ahead, go ahead.
Well, in my family, my great-grandfather was involved with Armenians as the U.S. ambassador to the Ottoman Empire at the beginning of the genocide. And he reported about it to the world. And of course, I heard about that as growing up. And then I got really fed up with my work with Herb Kelman and the Jews and the Palestinians because it didn't go anywhere. And I just listened. My husband was very involved with it as well. And honestly, I just heard it over and over again for years, people talking about it, and it was the same old stuff all the time. And then I thought, well, I could get involved with the Armenian set of issues. At least it's really new to me. And I found it very interesting. I enjoyed the fact that people wanted to listen to me, but it got very complicated at a certain point because to be the great-grandfather's great-granddaughter on the one hand, and then be a facilitator, so-called neutral, was at a position that I didn't figure out how to manage too well for some time.
Well, of course, you're speaking about Henry Morgenthau,
Right.
Ambassador Morgenthau. Have you had any reactions to your book from Armenians, Azerbaijanis, Turks?
A few. I had a couple nice reviews by Armenians, and people have individually spoken to me. I would say that what my message is a bit hard to swallow for Armenians, because it's trying to help. The idea is to help Armenians gain some understanding of the other side, Turks and maybe the Azerbaijanis, without only living in the judgment of it. And I think that's a very, very hard ask, but I think it is essential. It's not easy to evolve a moral perspective, and I think you've got to come at all of this with a moral perspective about the equality of all people fundamentally before the law. You've got to, and you've got to have law. And when a country goes against basic moral principles, it's pretty hard to make yourself try to understand them when they've violated the basic moral principle against your people. But that's what's required. Unless, we're going to rely on, well, I think it is required ongoingly. And it's asking for a complexity of mind, which isn't usually acquired by the majority of people. It isn't. I've worked on that with studies of how many people are able to evolve into complexity of mind, even though they're not involved in such terrible conflict with another group as the ones we're talking about. And therefore, the role of leadership in indicating that you can be loyal to your identity group, that Armenians of all kinds at all levels can be loyal as Armenians and even gain understanding of what happened that was so wrong and destructive, is something that is going to be a challenge, but a necessary one for leadership, I think.
What you're suggesting, if I understand you right, is that a people that has lived through and is still living through a collective trauma doesn't mean that it is intrinsically impossible to understand the other's trauma.
It's pretty hard.
It's hard, it takes effort, but that's what's required. Is that it?
Yes, without equalizing in any way. I mean, not at all. It's not about, and it's important to say that, not to measure and compare hurts.
Could
It's
you could you say a few words about generational trauma? How is collective trauma passed through generations?
I can't give you how the nervous systems communicate through generations, because the trauma is in our brain and in our nervous system. But it's a fact that it does. Now, it's interesting that not in all families does it happen. You can have transmitted trauma, intergenerational transmitted trauma, without everybody in the family carrying it.
Right,
So
right,
that's perhaps an anomaly, but it seems to be the reality.
right. One last question. Um, what would be your recommendations for Armenians to overcome the trauma, collective trauma? What should happen? What should be done? Who should do what?
Well, um, a, co- work at the group level across the country, training people who can facilitate, who understand trauma, who can hear it, and work with groups of Armenians who will talk about their trauma with each other and hear the different stories and validate them, and also know how to do some body level processing, because that really does the healing as much as it can be done, not to expect it ever fully to heal, because that's really rare, I think. Um, and to then feel that they can hear the similar kinds of things from the other side. And the large group experience that I would love to see replicated across Armenia, Azerbaijan, and Turkey is what I'm really proud of, that I pulled off at Harvard in 2009 or something with Hassan Jamal. Does everyone know who he was? He's the grandson of Jamal Pasha, who was one of the three heads of the CUP that carried out the genocide. And Jamal Pasha was a famous journalist in Turkey who did not deny, who denied the genocide, or went along with the Turkish position for quite a long time. And then he changed. And he even wrote a book, a best-selling book in Turkey called Genocide 1915. And I happened to go to Turkey at the time he had just returned he was a famous journalist, maybe I said that, and he had gone to Armenia with the Turkish foreign minister, I guess, to witness a moment of reconciliation, or meeting of Turks and Armenians in a football game. And while he went there as a journalist, but just as himself, a human being, he took the opportunity to go to the Genocide Memorial and lay flowers on the memorial. And he met with the grandson of one of the men who was part of the group that had assassinated his grandfather. And they had a talk. So I invited Hassan Jamal to come to Harvard and speak. And he came, and we had about 300 people in the room, Armenians, Turks, and others, because there are a lot of them around here in Cambridge, Mass, where I live. And it was a terrifically good meeting. And people changed a bit. And I came to believe that if you could hold meetings all over those three countries, Turkey, Armenia, and Azerbaijan, that people could come to and begin to process what had gone on, they would begin to see that others were human beings. And it's not going to bring back anyone who was dead. It will not make anything right. It will not gain any money out of Turkey, or return of possessions and everything that was stolen. But it might make going forward less likely to be sabotaged by people so still understandably angry and hurt by injustice.
Thank you very much, Pam. This was extremely insightful and challenging. Thanks for joining us and for answering the questions. Hriar?
Well, thank you, Jirair. Thank you, Pam. Pam, very quickly, if I may, during the Obama administration, I was tasked in the Joint Staff by his Secretary of State, and I'm sorry, great guy, I forget his name. This is the second term of the Obama administration. We were asked to put a study together to bring about reconciliation between Jews and Palestinians. And we ran a 6-month study, not me. I put together a whole team of psychologists, psychiatrists, social scientists. I'm not one of those. And they went in the area, in the region, and for 6 months, they interviewed Jews, Palestinians, Jews, back and forth. The bottom line of all this, on both sides, the Jews said if they would only acknowledge our suffering, and the Palestinians said if the Jews would only acknowledge our suffering. So it was, I did not expect that outcome, but that was the outcome. It was like 6 months. It was rigorous study. So Pamela, I want to thank you very much for a very insightful comments. Very insightful. And Jirair, thank you for moderating the panel. So, and I would remind the attendees, we have a pretty good set of attendees. Please post your questions in the chat box. We're going to get to them at the end. So now let's move on to the second panel discussion with Dr. Armen Goenjian, Dr. Jirair Libaridian, and Dr. Mikayel Zolyan. I will ask each panelist to make some opening statements on the topic at hand, and then to address each other. So the topics, so the following, very, very general. I mean, this is you guys' area, but let me suggest what were the psychosocial dimensions of the Armenian leadership thinking over the Karabakh negotiations between Armenia and Azerbaijan. So that's my opening statement. Let's go with let's start off. Let's do it this way, if I may. Let's go with Dr. Armen Goenjian first. Please take 10 minutes to address the topic, and then we go to Jirair, and then we go to Mikayel, and then you will be able to ask questions to each other. So Armen, over to you, please.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Dr. Steiner. That was a stimulating talk. With regards to trauma, I will, if there's time allows, talk about the difference between man-perpetrated violence, trauma, versus natural disasters, but often misunderstood. And what we're seeing, I think, with regards to Israel and Palestine is sad similarities, but not that similar. There's no acute problems with Turkey. There are Armenians, I don't think, except small minority may think about the land. There's not going to be exchanges. And I'm optimistic that things can move, but we have to accept reality. And reality is one of my concerns. With regards to my presentation, I want to say that I find a problematic mindset among the people of Armenia during the past 40 years. And that's what I want to address. And I think that when people have defenses is to protect one from uncomfortable feelings, anxiety, anger, humiliation. And when you attack the defense of a person with the intention to correct, it can be perceived easily as personal attack or put down or humiliation and so on. So it is possible to attack the Armenian situation without offending, without threatening. Now, let me talk about a major group denial. Denial is a defense. People use it when they are, have a difficult anxiety-provoking situation. For instance, if you have an abused woman who comes in complaining about depression, and you start talking about the problems, and the woman talks about trivia, and then you know that there's something else going on. So you ask about the family life, she minimizes the problems. About the husband, minimizes. I ask about the bruise on the neck. Oh, well, there was a misunderstanding, minimizes. And then we find out that the husband is a heavy drinker, comes and beats the woman up and so on. And she is in denial about all that. When I confront the woman and say, there's things you can do, like maybe separate, see how you can work it out, that's very uncomfortable for her. Normally, you wouldn't think it would be uncomfortable, but it is, because she is not used to, she doesn't have confidence, and she's afraid that she will not be able to put bread on the table. No other men will like her because she has lost her self-esteem, and so on. So this is denial. I'm trying to explain what I mean by denial. That's an example of denial. The group denial, when I was looking into this problem after Hriar asked me to join them, I'm looking at numerous writings on the wall. Sometimes even there's an elephant in the room, I'm saying to myself. So since 1994, I think, we still held on the belief that Karabakh does not belong to Azerbaijan. Rest of the world, every country does not think so. But we insisted that. So that's the mindset that we're approaching all these problems. The strong end of the lever trying to lift the long end of the lever. So it's Archimedes' principle, I think. And that's one given. Then we look at the Russians. We're heavily dependent and expect them to do everything for us. The Russians are saying, no, we have our own interest. And they're demonstrating in time and again. Over the period of 125 years, maybe 8, 9 times they flip-flop. In 94, I think they did with the Oman, was it 89, I'm sorry, took sides with the Oman forces of Azerbaijan against Armenia. Later on in 2020 and in between, periodically, they showed that they're not going to take sides. So the writing again on the wall, but we still expect Russia or Russian-backed politicians to do the work that failed time and again. Multiple presidencies, we fail, and we still expect that. So a good number of people are sticking to that ideal, partly, I think, just to oppose the current president, but that's the kind of mind frame a lot of people have. The other thing we minimize in the form of denial is the seriousness of Azeri buildup of armaments and joining forces with Turkey and Israel. We did not allow, we handshackled anyone who talked about compromises. We have those territories. Many times the Minsk group wanted to find a solution, and one of many solutions included giving some of these territories. No, we won't do it. Well, so there's the denial of the severity of a problem. And now we're talking about hubris, arrogance. We are smarter. We're more powerful. That mind frame intoxicating. It is intoxicating, as if you're drinking vodka. So we have that element that is self-defeating. Then we have the corruption problem, major problem. Now, the doctor earlier said, unless you admit the problems, this is another problem, unless we admit that. We haven't admitted. We want to go back to the old leaders to rescue us from whatever stress we're feeling now. That does not make sense. But it's just like that battered woman. We're going back. Now, and I'm not taking side that Pashinyan is any better or worse, but just the fact that we're choosing the worn-off shoe, that it will not make a dent in my feet, it's absurd. Now, talking about corruption, during, I think it was 99, the Transparency International published corruption index, Armenia shamefully 76 over 99 countries. Later on, they expanded to 180 countries. During that 76 was during Kocharian. During the next regime, it was 105 out of 180 nations. Transparency International expanded. Then from 2018 to 2021, we improved. We improved 58 over 180, which is the right direction. And then it became stagnant. That's not acceptable. If we're going to be a good democracy, not nominal democracy, we have to accept our faults. We have to accept our faults and be able to have some unity and come with a unified force to deal look for peaceful solutions with Aliyev. Many things they talk about Aliyev, many things they talk about our president. Some of them are partially true, others are totally true, but both of them want peace. Both of them have narcissistic needs. And I think a peaceful solution is something they both will appreciate. And they will do half negotiations. They will need, like the experts here on the panel, to do the negotiations, and some even harsher people, but that's the way to go. Now, after corruption, let me address the fears that Armenian people are having. The general population, I think, has fears of another attack, another number of youth dying, destruction, unemployment, all those bad things that come with war. That's a fear. And oftentimes they cover that fear by this denial. You know, things are going to be okay. Let's not spend energy on that. Let's elect this leader and things will be okay. Wishful thinking and misinformation by corrupt media, not all of them, corrupt media being sponsored by East and West, Europe, US, and Russia, vitiates the system. And makes it difficult for Armenians to make sense of all this. So that brings us to civil public debates, calling them not to be bright, think tanks who have to be transparent so we know if they are taking sides. So these are the thoughts that I have. Now, with regard to back to the corruption index, we have the grafters there who have sucked the blood out of the system. Coffers are empty. Some of them are oligarchs that have been helpful for the building of the country, but many are kleptocrats. And who do they work with? The government. Can we correct that system? Of course we can. We have to have the will. Part of the loop is the judiciary who supports this kind of corruptions. So I think these are all corrigible things that we can work on. And, I have to invoke here the church. I have to be very careful. So I am going to talk about what this is going to be personal. I'm Protestant, and the vengeance spirit is not as strong. So it has helped me cope with, and I have dedicated 23 years for Armenia after the earthquake, developed programs there, had 2 clinics, Spitak and Gyumri, and provided treatment. When they invited me to Turkey, it was very hard. United Nations program, they invited me as an expert in trauma, and it was possible. And I went there and worked with them. And I think that is possible because there is such a thing as forgiveness and accepting reality. Those are the 2 things that we have. And I think that the coming years can be very good for Armenia if we put our will into it. Thank you.
Armen, thank you so much for these comments. There's a lot there to absorb. I have to be honest with you. I'm going to listen afterwards to the recording and give it a lot more thought. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Before we go, we're going to come back, and please keep posting your question. Dr. Steiner, there's a long comment for you from Armenia-Azerbaijan. Please read it in the chat box. We're going to get to it when this session 2 is over. That's from Armenia-Azerbaijan. Okay, so let's move on right now. So Jirair, over to you. Take 10 minutes, and then I encourage the audience to keep posting your questions. We're going to get to them and post them in the chat box. We're going to get to them because this topic is going to raise a lot of questions. So thoughtful questions, please. So Jirair, let's go to you. You have 10 minutes to comment on the topic.
Thank you, Hriar. Let me begin by saying that I agree with Armen's comments. They're basic, fundamental, and instructive. The second point I want to make is that in the early 90s, in the government of which I was part, we did recognize that the solution to Garapal was not an independent or Garapal united with Armenia, but one that would have to deal with the Azerbaijani territorial integrity and what the world considered. And the solution, the formula we found is that we should settle the war issues and the territorial issues, and then in a second stage, think about possible solutions to the status issue. One of the problems of the negotiations in the 90s was the equation of Azerbaijan with Turkey. which started especially with the Sumgait pogroms. That is, Turkey was seen as the threat and the genocidal country, and therefore Azerbaijan was doing the same thing. And that equation created huge barrier to dealing with Azerbaijan. The next comment is with regard to our projection of Turkey and Azerbaijan in our negotiations. In most cases, there's a problem with who we are negotiating with. Are we negotiating with actual Azerbaijan, actual Turkey, or are we negotiating what we project Azerbaijan or Turkey to be? That is, we have definite understanding. We're so sure of what they are, and they are defined historically and genocidally. So at the end, we are negotiating with ourselves, with our own projection of what Turkey or Azerbaijan is. Let me give you an example of how trauma, transmitted transgenerational trauma, translates into personal. I was assigned by the President Bedrosian in the summer of '92 to be the negotiator with Turkey. And there was the first official big delegation, important delegation from Ankara, and I was supposed to start negotiations with them. Now, mind you, from the 70s on, I personally had gone through a lot of intellectual, but also psychological change to come to terms with what Turkey is and what would future Armenia deal with Turkey and how we should deal with the genocide situation. Yeah, I went through that, and I have a book coming out through that transfer regarding that political, intellectual, and psychological transformation. It should be out by the end of the year, both in Armenian and English. The president assigns me. I prepare my delegation, and I am entering the room where the 7 or 8 Turkish diplomats are standing, waiting for me. This is the negotiation room in the presidential building. And as I entered the building, despite all my preparation intellectually, psychologically, my knees buckled. I could hardly stand up. And I forced myself to walk, shook hands, and I can't remember how. And I sat down somehow on my side, and my colleagues sat down. And instead of giving welcoming words, I asked them to speak. It took me about 5 minutes to overcome that. After that, I was fine. But despite everything, I was thinking during those seconds about the little boy Jirair sitting next to my grandfather, a soldier in the Ottoman army, escaped death 3 times. And I'm saying this is the little 4-year-old Jirair who's going to negotiate on behalf of the Republic of Armenia with the Republic of Turkey. It was very real. As I said, despite all the preparation I had, intellectually and psychologically. I don't know how others did it, but I know that almost every other negotiator after me, or even one of my experts who traveled with me to Ankara twice, There's deep distrust, which has been mentioned by Ram and Armen, deep distrust. And that distrust is the starting point. I know one of the negotiators who consulted with me, his first question was, can we trust the Turks? My answer was no, and I don't trust anyone. You don't trust anyone in politics, in diplomacy. You just try to get the best and the best guarantees. But that distrust is so deep that it is not easy to do it simply by struggling personally. It has to be done collectively. And of course, the reason, by negotiating with Turkey, I was declared a traitor and all kinds of things. And I saw something 2 days ago, someone arguing with what I had said as calling me Libaridoğlu. That is son of a Turk and whatever. So that doesn't bother me. It really doesn't, because I think I'm on the right track. But it's very important to also extend this to the leadership of Armenia in the 1990s, which was bright, they were very thinking people. But the first thing I noticed about them, working with them, was that their understanding of the world was extremely limited. It was limited. Their news came from Moscow. This is the 1990s. Although they had gone through a change with regard to relations with Turkey and supported normalization, but this was not a process of psychological change, of self-challenge. It was an intellectual process. It didn't expand to other areas of the person. And of course, for the most part, it didn't expand to the people. So what I would say is that the trauma which Pam described and Armen described and we need to understand is something we really need to overcome. We really need to overcome, and that requires not only intellectual effort but also collective effort. Not easy, Armen said it, but I think now it's getting into the minds and even hearts of the younger generation in Armenia, which is a hopeful sign. And that is the peace that the Prime Minister talks about did not make much sense in November when I was here for 3 months. Now I've been here 3 months, and it seems like it's seeping in. It is being translated into something personal. And at least the younger generation and women, I think, are accepting it. And hopefully that will be a long process, and we will get away from what Armen mentioned as the reliance on Russia. History does prove, as Armen said, we can't rely on Russia. We can't also rely on the West. No one is going to help us if there's any war. No one will. I'll stop here. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Jirair. Lots to absorb, least I can say. A lot of issues again to the audience. Please go ahead and post your questions and comments in the chat box. We'll get to them. As I said, there's a lot to absorb here. So let's move on. We're going to go to Mikayel Zolyan next. Mikayel, over to you, and take your time. And after you're done, we're going to open it up for Q&A. Over to you, Mikayel.
Thank you very much. I hope everyone can hear me. I'm not a psychologist. My training is in history and anthropology, and also I've had some experience in politics and conflict resolution. So when I think about trauma, I don't think I can comment so much on the psychological aspects of it, but I look at it from the point of view of a historian, anthropologist, and a political analyst. And I know that trauma can manifest differently when it comes to specific policies, when it comes to the narratives, the collective memory that we have. And when we're talking about overcoming trauma, that's probably a very, difficult thing. We probably are never going to overcome trauma completely, but we can integrate this trauma and we can control to what extent it influences our policies, to what extent it becomes, overarching part of our identity. Because I think it's important to, understand that this trauma is there and it will always be part of our identity. But it's also important to understand that our identity is not only about this trauma. Our identity is about many things, and this trauma is one of them, but it's only one of them. And I want to bring an example. Right now, I'm in Cyprus on vacation because I don't have enough money to go to Sevan or Tsarkadzor or Dilijan. So now Cyprus is actually the cheapest holiday destination if you're in Armenia. And I was in this really great Greek fish restaurant on the seaside, very beautiful place, a lot of traditional, wonderful Greek food. And there was one table which first I thought they were Greeks, but then I realized they were speaking Turkish, and they were very loud. They didn't they didn't somehow feel that they shouldn't be loud, and people around them didn't pay any attention to them. And this is Cyprus, which is basically half of the island is occupied by the Turkish army right now. So, and we know that Greeks have their own trauma. Of course, we don't want to be like comparing trauma, whose trauma is bigger and so on, but we know that Greeks have their own trauma when it comes to dealing with Turkey. And of course, it's different. It's a different history, but there are also many similarities. And yet, I realized that for these Greek people in this restaurant, it was completely okay that there is the big table with Turkish people, and it didn't seem to create any kind of, mm, psychological distress for anyone. And I was thinking, what would happen in a similar situation in Armenia, and I was not sure. So why I'm bringing this example, I think it shows that there are different ways of dealing with a trauma. I'm sure the Greeks have their own narratives, and Greeks are very much aware of the trauma that they have, but also they maybe have a little bit different way of dealing with this. And in this sense, I would say that maybe we need to learn from Greece, from Greek Cypriots in this sense, because when we look at the relations between Greece and Turkey, no one could say they are friendly. They're part of the same alliance, NATO alliance. They have diplomatic relations, they have open border, they have trade. And of course, there are the different historical narratives, there are the different identities, there is still this conflict which has not been completely resolved, but they are able to exist together in a certain context, in a certain geopolitical context. And I think that's something that we can learn a lot from. I want to also thank our previous speakers because they said a lot of the things that I was going to say, and I think it's really very valuable that you're having these discussions. And I would say that people in Armenia, someone based in Armenia, I would say that we don't hear enough diasporan voices having these critical, self-reflexive discussions, because unfortunately there are some voices coming from diaspora which tend to kind of monopolize this uh, voicing of diaspora's opinion, which are not very self-reflexive, and they are often not very constructive when it comes to dealing with these issues. So I think it's very important that these voices are heard in Armenia, and I think these voices can really influence also the decision making in Armenia. Of course, I understand that you don't want to be too assertive, but these other people, they are quite loud, So what I see is some people in diaspora, they are being very, sensitive. They don't want to talk too loud because they understand that, there are certain sensitivities. And then there are others who are yelling all the time. So, maybe some people, while I understand that you don't want to be too assertive or too loud, maybe also you could be a little bit more, present in the Armenian discussions that are taking place in Armenia. Some of you are doing that. Jirair is, he's all the time talking in Armenian media. Of course, he's being called a traitor because of the things he's saying, but I think we heard him, and this is not something that can scare him. And I remember that the things that Jirair was saying, they were always criticized very harshly, but then a year or two later, or maybe 10 years later, people were coming to terms with it, and there were at least some of them, not everyone, but a lot of people were saying, okay, you know what, that made sense actually. We wish we listened to him more. So a couple of points. I mean, I'm not going to be able to. There's so much to talk about, but there are a couple of things that I want to say. That a lot of the things that you mentioned, especially what Armen mentioned, like you have a kind of blind spot in your mind that you can be very smart, you can know a lot of things, but there are certain things which just don't notice. So, and I know, someone who was in the Armenian parliament during the war of 2020, there were certain things that I failed to see, not because I didn't know enough. I've been researching the Karabakh conflict since I was a student in high school and in university. I wrote my dissertation about that. But yet there were certain things that I couldn't imagine. For example, I could never imagine that Russia would completely sell out Armenia. And I understood that, this is geopolitics, that countries operate based on their interests. I knew all that. But there was a part of me, part of my Armenian identity, which told me that it's absolutely impossible that Russia will just completely sell us out. And this was not a rational idea based on facts. It was something which came as part of my education, part of my, I don't know, upbringing as an Armenian, maybe part of the media I was consuming. And when it actually happened, it was a shock for me. I could not understand how that's possible. And I think that a lot of people in Armenia have went through this shock. And from the government to ordinary voters, to people who were on the front line, to people in Artsakh who lost their homes, and people reacted to it differently. So I would say there are two main types of reaction to that. I mean, I'm simplifying, but one reaction is that you find a scapegoat and you think, okay, you know what? I'm gonna preserve my old picture of reality. Uh, I'm going to find a scapegoat. In some cases, it's Pashinyan. In some cases, it's someone else. In some cases, it's the old government who was corrupt. And it was corrupt, of course, and that played a major role in what happened. And Pashinyan made some mistakes. But, like you focus on these specific people and you kind of save your picture of the world. You don't want to think about those things that, maybe these fundamental ideas about the world which I had, they were wrong. And another way is to reassess your picture of the world, to understand that, okay, maybe some of the things that we thought were true are not true. Maybe Russia is not really this big brother or savior who would always be there for us. Maybe Azerbaijanis are not these, uh, primitive barbarians who can never master diplomacy and technology, and we will always be smarter than them, uh, and so on and so on and so forth. So I would say that the main divisions that we have in Armenia, this is not between the left and right, I don't know, nationalists and cosmopolitans, conservatives and progressives, etc., etc., etc. The main division is between those who are willing to accept this new reality, to see this new reality for what it is, and those who want to kind of preserve their old picture of the world because it's comfortable. And I would say that people in Armenia are on different stages of acceptance of new reality. Some are still bargaining, some are still in denial, some have come to accept this new reality, and some have also come to see the new opportunities that this new reality brings. Because, of course, what happened was tragic. The loss of life was tragic. The war was tragic. The loss of Artsakh, which is part of our historical homeland, it was tragic. But also now, once we understand that this is the reality, we can start also looking for new opportunities. And in the last couple of years, we have seen that these opportunities are rising because Armenia has finally been able to regain some of its subjectivity as a political actor. Armenia is no longer this sort of, semi-colony of Moscow, which just does what is being dictated from there. Armenia has been able to engage in a process of negotiations with Turkey and Azerbaijan, which is very different from the imitation that we've had for about 20 years at least. I mean, the last serious negotiations were taking place in the 1990s when Jirair was there, but what happened after that was mostly an imitation. It was not a serious negotiation. And we've also been able to create new links. We've been able to work with European Union, with United States, of course, with a lot of help from the Armenian diaspora. And we've also been able to find new partners in the global south, like India, for example. And, we are receiving weapons from India, which, nobody would have thought about this 5 years ago. So I would say that, once you come to kind of recognize the reality, even though part of the reality is quite sad, this opens new opportunities. You start being in the moment, you start recognizing what actually is. And this means that you can find new opportunities, you can do new things. And I think that's why we have a certain sense of optimism in Armenia, which is new. I mean, probably it wasn't there 2 or 3 years ago. And this is a sense of optimism, which I see, in a lot of places. Once, you also, when you talk to people who are visiting Armenia, or when you talk to, for example, the Russian migrants who left Russia because they don't feel safe there and they decided to move to Armenia and they're building their lives, at least for a certain time, amount of time. Their plan is to live in Armenia because they see the potential, they see the future. So overall, I think I'm quite optimistic. And I think that once we do this work, which is very complicated, very difficult work, we can do a lot for the future of Armenia, and I think we've started doing that. So I'll stop here because I can talk forever, but probably it's time for questions.
Yeah, well,
And
thank
once
you.
again, thank you, Armen.
Oh, thank you, Mikayel. Thank you so much, and to Jirair and to Armen. A lot to absorb, and particularly in the new things that's emerging in Armenia, the new direction. I mean, you all have alluded to it, and hopefully the optimism in the Armenian population. So, why don't we give you, the three of you, to kind of have a little dialogue between you on certain issues that you think are important that should be reemphasized, raised, the three of you. Then we'll open it up to things. So let's spend about 15 minutes between the three of you on how you see the country moving forward.
Hriar, if I may,
Please.
question to Armen. Armen, you've worked in Armenia, as you stated, for a long time, and with two clinics, beginning with the earthquake. How did the earthquake itself, as a trauma, affect people's view of the state and of politics?
Well, let me just before I go into politics, I want to correct something. We looked at people from Sumgait, Kirovabat, and Baku, compared it with Gyumri people. And we did cross-sectional and longitudinal, and we had the Yerevan group for control. The trauma of Sumgait was the most severe, as was the trauma of the earthquake. One is man-made, the other one is nature. But the most serious problems following this kind of thing is post-traumatic disorder and depression. And both were severe in this both groups. So there was misunderstanding around that time that man-made traumas are worse. That's not how you measure. If the trauma is the measurement, not the type of trauma, of course, rape is severe. So severity is what you earthquake trauma was. So it really lingered on, and the recovery was slow because of adversities. What were the adversities? There were housing problems, transportation. You don't have money, you don't have jobs, you have more illnesses. So all these adversities hindered the recovery even more. So at that point, they were not that much interested in Karabakh war. They had their hands full. The people who came from the refugees were located in two places that we evaluated. One was Gyumri, the other one was Arsni, near Purehavan. So the people in Gyumri had double trauma. They did the worst of the worst because they had the earthquake and then the war situation and man-made trauma and the natural trauma. So, but their problems, politics is one. In not knowing what to do next, the confusion about whether they would be able to go back, stay there, go escape to Europe. All this confusion is a stressful thing. And a lot of people frowned on them, especially this listen group of people who came from Armenia, as if they don't have enough burden. Some people in Yerevan treat them as if they are burdens on them. So that's another stress added on. So just wanted to bring in this topic. And one other thing about the trauma I want to mention is the equivalency of trauma. Now, in the situation we were massacred, most helpless, some group of commandos fought back, but the mass of Armenians were simple human beings massacred. Now, with Azerbaijan, there is an equivalency. We kicked a lot of Azeris out early on. The atrocities on both sides. So there's this more things that we have done. So if I don't have to go to Azerbaijan, to Baku, and look at the refugee who fled Armenia or fled from the vicinity of Karabakh, those 7 regions, and was traumatized himself and went to now Baku, refugee. Aliyev doesn't give money because they will settle down. So then they will come find a home, not return back to their homes. So this problem that we were suffering in Armenia was more or less the trauma reactions similar to what was going on with them. So I can understand that. And would the people tell me a traitor? They are just ignore them. Most intelligent people are going to eventually understand that there is an equivalency of the event there. So with regards how they view, I really tried to do, before we met, a group of people that my colleague, Dr. Ida Karayan, has been working for years. For years now, she is working at Tavush and all the other border regions with army families and people who are just suffering every day, experiencing fear of retaliation, fear of attack for years. I wanted to see their view and some of the people that they are providing treatment. I got only half response. Some of them were scared to respond. But what I will pursue, but what one of the things that showed up is they were, I was surprised, almost half were afraid to answer. Why do they want this information? This is the question they ask. And the time was very limited. We couldn't provide all the necessary information. But the other half that responded unanimously gave to the current government. And what they wanted is security and economic improvement of their lives. Those two taking out.
Thank you.
They're tired of wars. And whoever can bring peace will be welcome. And I think that eventually they will have to accept that going back is very difficult. Who would want to go?
Armen, you're breaking up. I don't know what's happening with your connection.
Oh, I don't.
A little bit. Well, you're back. You're back now, but you
Yeah.
broke up. Do you have any more comments you want to make?
Well, I would like to see our government personnel be more diplomatic. They have the right attitude, and people irritate them. There's an old saying that the caravan doesn't stop every dog that barks on the way. Our government officials have to be more diplomatic. You don't throw sand on president of Russia's face, and even the opposition in Armenia, you have to be more careful, because insulting them is going to create more enemies, and your voting numbers will come down, practically speaking. So, Jirair.
Thank you. Yeah, Jirair, any comments, Jirair?
No. We need to hear from others.
I think we have Mikayel, Armenia-Azerbaijan has a question for you. Have you had a chance to read it in the chat box?
Yeah, I think it was more of a comment rather than
Yeah, you're right. It's a comment.
question.
It was a comment.
Yeah, and thank you for this comment. I think it's very important, and it shows that we have different experiences in some senses, but also a lot of commonalities. I completely agree. Also, I wanted to kind of echo what Armen said. When he says that the government officials need to be diplomatic, I agree. But I think it's also part of the trauma, especially when, inside Armenia, the opposition and the government, they are trading these insults. A lot of it is also part of the trauma of the war, especially when they're saying, you're the traitor, and no, you're the traitor, because basically everybody is calling everybody else a traitor. I've been called a traitor many times. Unfortunately, I wish I could have said that I always responded diplomatically, but sometimes I also lose my nerve. So I think it's also part of it is the lack of political culture, because we are a new democracy and people are still not used to kind of, for example, in British parliamentary history, you have a really long history of, how to insult each other in ways which are quite diplomatic and, not very rude. In Armenia, we don't have this tradition, but also a lot of it is trauma.
Okay. Let's
Can
see.
I make a short comment?
Oh, please go ahead. Go ahead, Jirair.
Our greatest satirist, Hagop Baronian, late 19th century, has a wonderful line. Swearing is absence of proof. When you don't have any proof, then you swear. So all of us can wear the label traitor as a badge of honor.
Yeah. We get it, Jirair.
That's it, Hriar. Go on.
Okay. We do have a comment from Armenia-Azerbaijan. We had there was a comment from Armenia to you, Dr. Steiner. Did you get a chance to look it over? Just at the
No.
beginning.
What do you...
Okay, Armenia, you're online. Can you briefly state your question or comment to Pam, please? Go ahead, Armenia.
Sure. Thank you so much for the thoughtful presentation. I think I had I had a pretty long comment, and I apologize. I think I have way too many comments. I think I just been reading a lot about trauma, and so this is like insanely interesting area for me. So one of the fundamental issues that I have with this field of psychology right now is putting the expectation on the victims to forgive the perpetrator. This is done just outside of the context of genocide trauma. It's done with rape. It's done with all kinds of violence. And so there's now actually research that's coming out suggesting that is not necessarily the most appropriate way, and that healing does not need to occur with forgiveness. Like you don't need to forgive somebody to move on, right? We're learning that that is actually a very, very real possibility. So that said, I want to understand how you distinguish or differentiate between healing, reconciliation, and forgiveness.
Well, I'm happy.
Yeah, Pam, go ahead, and then we'll go to Armen after you. Go ahead, Pam.
Okay. I'm very happy you asked the question. I do not ever bring forgiveness in. I think it has no place whatsoever in political discourse. And I'm also very against expecting forgiveness for what's unforgivable. So it's not there. And we're not talking about if somebody gets to forgiveness, well, good for them, but it's not part of political work, in my view. And it's inappropriate. I'm again, I think that the kind of healing that I hope for will come very gradually, as does forgiveness, if it ever does in certain situations. But it's about building trust and taking steps and dealing with going backwards sometimes. So, learning enough to help yourself to continue to move forward and to work with others to do that. Does that please push me a little bit more if there's something else? Because
No, actually, that's I really appreciate that differentiation because I did not realize that that was your stand in terms of forgiveness, and so I very much appreciate you explaining that.
I'm glad you
I,
asked.
yeah, and I really appreciate that the field is moving towards that understanding and not pushing victims to to gain forgiveness first before they move on with their healing journey.
It's
I
terrible to not to expect. I mean, when people get into trying to get reconciliation, it has to be a two-way process. The perpetrator has a huge role to play, unless you're really forced to deal with everything on your own, which is sometimes the situation,
Yes.
more often than
One common area, like I put this in response to what Armen was talking about, is that wait, did I do that? Yes, I did. Is the experience of losing life. For instance, I mean, I've had many conversations with my own mom about this, about parents or mothers losing their soldiers who went to war, right? That is a collective trauma that any parent, any mom, any human being can relate to, right? The loss of life. Why the war occurred and why people are fighting each other and killing each other is a whole different story. But that is perhaps one common area where I think both sides can relate to, right? It doesn't matter why the war happened. Of course it does, right? But for the purpose of relating to each other, we can all relate that someone lost a son, someone lost a parent, someone lost a brother, right? I think that's a very human relatable experience. So maybe that's one common area where some of this relatableness conversations can start occurring. But again, it would have to take someone to intellectually shut down, like I have to shut down the brain. Why you were killing people in Artsakh and now, and why we were in this war, right? But and again, what we do intellectually and what can happen in reality are just, far different things, right?
Let's see, Armen, there's a question from Zanko Armenia, and basically is asking, how do we, how do you deal with trauma when it isn't just past trauma, it's current trauma that happens over and over again, just in the last couple of months, Azerbaijan destroyed. So how do you deal with past versus present trauma? That's basically what he's asking. And I think you're probably best positioned to address that issue.
Well, personally, trauma is a trauma. The past leaves a scar. So, and again, let me mention, when you talk about forgive, you're dealing with yourself. You can't control the rapist. You can control your inside. And you try to deal with that, whether you forgive internally in your mind or try to gradually desensitize and distance yourself from those memories and so on. There are ways you can deal with that. Now, with regards to ongoing trauma, they are reactivating the old trauma plus the new one. So the insecurity feeling is what he is talking about. And the pain of the past is renovated with the addition of the new one. And so this kind of thing can lead into really a sticky situation where you have complex trauma. I'm not talking only two times, ongoing, that many, like the POWs, I think those prisoners I'm hopefully they are not subjected to harsh conditions in Baku, that they can be having that complex trauma. That's a more difficult thing to deal with. But the basic thing is, you have to have certain defensive, psychological, and also assurances so that we are going to be independent. We're going to serve in the army. You know how many people I had around me who were bribing not to serve in the army. We're not going to give money to the sergeant not to go to the front. We have to dedicate and work. And that's how we can keep our country safe.
Yeah.
We scientists, let's talk about 1 second about the scientists. The most important people, physicists, where were they? All over the world. The engineers, all those scientists, and other kind of defensive measures give us advice. We didn't take care of them. They didn't have money to stand on their feet. So this mind frame has to change to think about defensive measures. And it's possible, it's within reach. From Toronto, Dr. Goenjian, an engineer at Mikayel, he was an expert on laser and knew about the laser programs in Armenia. He wrote at the time of our defeat that Armenia has 4 or 5 years to be able to defend itself with laser weapons. I don't know what we did. I really don't know. Now I think that recently, finally, things have turned. And that's how you assuage some of the fears. And the fear is going to be there. Once you get bitten, you shy twice. But it could be moderated, it could be managed. So that's the traumatic experience that gentleman was asking about.
All right, let's take that last
Yeah,
question from
yeah,
Pamela,
yeah.
Mahshudan,
Well,
and then
but what I want to do, Hagop, is I want to give, hang on, I want to give each panelist 2 minutes closing remarks before we cut off. So let's start off with Pam. Pam, couple of quick comments, just, now that you heard all the questions and the
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Broadly speaking, trauma causes less than optimal thinking. Surviving a trauma very often leads to feeling entitled and therefore to do anything you want. The suffering has made you closer to God, and therefore you could do what you want. Envy Israeli Jews, not all of them, of course. Also, thinking after trauma, I suggest that even the thought of losing Karabakh made Armenian decision makers and military unrealistic because it was too unbearable even to think about it. So they felt they were invincible. And I remember being at a meeting as the war got started with Armenians, this is in the diaspora, really loudly proclaiming that we're winning, of course we'll win. And it was rah rah, and it just was really a kind of scary scene. And lastly, to Armen, FYI, in Israel, there are groups that have been going on for a long time of parents of the bereaved from both sides meeting and finding common cause, just as you were suggesting.
Well, thank you, Pam. Okay, let's go to Jirair, over to you. 2-minute closing remarks before we end the session.
I won't take 2 minutes. I will make just one comment, although many more do come to mind. One is I want to refer to the fear issue, a fear that must be overcome. The question is that in a lot of our political thinking and the psychology, fear is presented as strategy. Instead of fear, understanding fear, overcoming fear in terms of what really is around us. Fear as the basis of strategy is the absence of strategic thinking. You can start with fear, which is very human, but you have to overcome. You have to understand that fear, and you cannot turn fear into strategy. I'm afraid, therefore, whatever. That's all I want to add.
Thank you very much, Jirair. Armen, over to you, and then we'll go to Mikayel. Any?
Well, I would like to see money collected for the refugees from Karabakh in army, well armed, and pursue policy of peace wisely without antagonizing people. Expect transparency from media, transparency from think tanks, so that people can make better informed decisions who they are electing.
Right. Okay. Armen, are you done or?
Yeah,
Oh, okay. Oh, thought maybe we lost you. Okay, Mikayel, over to you for closing comments.
Thank you. Like, there are many things to say, but I just want to focus on one thing that was mentioned several times. How can we, do we trust the other side? Of course, we don't trust the other side, in this negotiation process more than we trust any other political actors. But I think we have to understand that they are also rational in their own ways. Of course, they have their own narratives, but they have their own rationality. And it's not that there is some kind of, when it comes to Azerbaijan, that they irrationally hate us and they want to destroy us for no reason. I mean, they have their own narrative, they have their own story. We have our own story, and both these stories create this situation. But we have to, not from the moral point of view, but from the point of view of working out a policy, we have to understand also their narrative. And we don't have to agree with it, but we have to know what's going on in their minds. And I think what you've been doing, it also can help, like the research that you mentioned earlier. I think it's one of the things that can help us to understand better the other side. So once we understand them, it's not so much about trusting, but about understanding what is their logic, and formulating our policy according to that understanding. And thank you very much for having me. It was a great honor.
Okay, yeah, I want to thank all the panelists. Just want to point out there's a very positive comment by Karnik in the chat box. Read it. It's the last comment that came in. Very hopeful. So with that, I wanna thank all the panelists. I learned a lot. So Hagop, over to you to close the session.
Thank you very much, Hriar. Thank you for this outstanding discussion. Thank you, Dr. Steiner and Dr. Libaridian, Dr. Goenjian, and Dr. Mikayel. And of course, ARPA Institute is very, very interested in continuing this kind of discussions so that we understand better who we're dealing with, and therefore we can maybe have better policies and better strategies. Please donate if you like what you heard, and let's do much more in Armenia. There's a lot to do. Thank you very much, and hopefully we'll see you in our next panel discussion, which is going to be on tentatively on July 25. It will be on the traditional Armenian cuisine. Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you, Rob and Hriar.
Thank you all. Thank you all the panelists.
Nice meeting you, Dr. Steiner.
Thank you.